Just like to show our land acknowledgement and just point to the screen for you to see. And we acknowledge with gratitude that the area we are discussing today is situated on the unceded traditional territory of the Latako Dene. I'll start off with introductions for the folks who we have today to speak to you. It's a pleasure for us to be here to provide you with important information about this project, to hear your comments and provide answers to your questions. So we thank you for taking the time to join us. So I'm now happy to introduce our presenters representing the partners involved in the project who are with us here today. I'm going to ask each of them to unmute their mic and say hello so that anyone who's chosen speaker view can put a face to a name. So I'll start with Kirsten Baillie, Senior Manager of Development for BC Housing. You want to just go ahead and say hi, Kirsten?
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us.
And next we have David Shea, Nonprofit Portfolio Manager, also from BC Housing. Would you like to say hello, David?
Good evening. Nice to meet you. Thank you for having us.
We also have with us today Samuel Hogg, Development Manager from BC Housing.
Hi, everyone.
And we have Tanya Turner, Director of Development Services for the City of Quesnel.
Good evening. Thank you for being here.
So we're going to start up this session by just going quickly over our guiding principles for the time that we have together tonight to ensure that we have a successful session. So I would like to draw your attention to the slide currently being displayed. We commit to come together in the spirit of community, to share information openly and transparently, and to work to balance time for sharing information and answering questions. We ask that all participants in this evening's session use respectful people-first language. You will hear us refer to people experiencing homelessness or people who use drugs, for example. We ask that people ask genuine questions and allow space for answers. And lastly, please consider that there may be people joining us this evening who are experiencing or have experienced homelessness, and we really want to be mindful of everyone's lived experience on this call this evening. Lastly, some details about the format of the meeting before we start our main presentation. You're all currently in listen-only mode, and when the time comes for discussion, our team will mute and unmute participants. You can use the Q&A function, which you'll find on your toolbar, the chat function to communicate with myself or Alexia, the team meeting host, if you have technical difficulties or need to reach the hosts, but you will not be able to chat with other participants. We are also using the Q&A button on the toolbar. That is where you can put written questions in at any time, and we'll read them at the end of the session. So during the discussion, we encourage people to raise their hands to request to ask a question. And as I said, alternately, you can type those questions into the Q&A window at any time. I would also like to note that the Q&A portion of the session this evening is not being recorded. So for technical support, if you're having difficulties during the session, you can use the contact information currently on the screen to contact our team, and they will do their best to help you. If you do need to use the phone to enter the session rather than being online through the app, there's also that option, and that is listed on here as well. If you do need to join by phone, phone participants can raise their hand by dialing *9. We're going to keep things moving and reserve approximately an hour at the end of the presentation for questions and discussion, and we will move on to the main part of our presentation now. I'm going to turn things over to Carson Avenue, Senior Manager of Development for BC Housing.
Thank you. Okay, so first I'd like to start a little bit with what is homelessness looking like in Quesnel. In 2023, our research has found that 127 people were identified as experiencing homelessness. This is up from 2020, in which we found 121 people were experiencing homelessness. It's really important to note, though, that these numbers are fluid. It's hard to identify people who are actually homeless, and there's also a slew of people who are at risk of homelessness through couch surfing and other precarious housing situations. So of the people who identified as experiencing homelessness, 57% identified as male and 40% identified as females. And it's important to note of these individuals, 59% identified as Indigenous, with the majority of that Indigenous population, 64%, identifying having reported and lived with generational trauma from the residential school system. It's also important to note that 90% of the respondents have been in the community for more than 1 year and 77% for more than 5 years. So we're seeing a strong Quesnel-based homeless population at 127 people. In terms, sorry, next slide. In terms of homelessness as it relates to the whole housing continuum or housing ecosystem, at the moment this evening, we're talking about how to address homelessness on my left-hand side of the screen. But it's important to note for a vibrant housing community, there needs to be housing right along this continuum. We need to see housing at a variety of different points and different affordability levels to really create these complete communities that we're all looking to live and work in. So this diagram shows that there's housing to address homelessness with supportive housing, but BC Housing works with our nonprofit partners to provide a variety of different housing sources, from social housing to rental housing and right up through affordable rental housing. Next slide, please. In Quesnel, BC Housing with our nonprofit partners have worked on projects such as Elliott Street, which is 28 units of supportive housing. McNaughton Avenue, which is run by the Lions and provides housing specifically for our seniors population. Bowron Avenue, which is focused on Indigenous housing and serves the needs of our Indigenous population. And McLean Avenue, which is focused on an affordable housing, so providing a range of housing with different affordability levels. We are continuing to work on over 50 units of additional housing in Quesnel, providing housing focused on Indigenous housing needs and also housing for women and children fleeing violence. So the need to create a variety of housing choices and options in the city of Quesnel is something that's really important. I'm going to turn it over to David to speak a little bit more specifically about supportive housing.
Thank you, Kirsten. This here is an image I'm sure you'll recognize of Elliott Street, which is a supportive housing built on the west side of the river. And this is essentially what we're proposing to recreate at Grace. So these buildings include a variety of services that are designed to support people who have been homeless to develop the skills to live independently. And many of the folks that are living there just haven't lived in homes or had those kinds of services for a long time. So there's often a lot of life skills that are required to help people start to acclimatize back to living in a building. If you could go to the next slide, please. And this, in a way, this is essentially how our budgets are designed. So the buildings include staffing, 24/7 staff, both tenant support workers and cook staff. There's a process for selecting people to live there, a community access committee that local stakeholders would participate in. There's a whole property maintenance program, of course, to maintain the building and to help make sure that it fits into the community. There's a variety of design features as well that meets crime prevention, safety, and fit into the aesthetic of the neighborhood. Each of these buildings are operated with a program agreement between BC Housing and a nonprofit service provider. And again, there's a community advisory committee, which is a place for the community to have a voice. And so I'll point out is the resident selection process, which is a committee-based process for choosing who's going to live there and getting to know who the individuals are. And then there's the community advisory committee, which is a place for neighbors and stakeholders to be able to learn about what's going on there, but also a place for them to provide feedback if they're having experiences with the residents in the neighborhood. This is a forum for people to be able to voice those concerns, and a way for you to know the operator and not be in that position where you're wondering, you know, who do I call and how do I get this dealt with? And the next slide, please. This is just another version of the same story. There's self-contained studio suites with kitchenettes. There's a process of, and people get a meal, 2 meals typically. People pay rent to live there. The primary service, along with providing those basic life supports and safety supports, is referrals for other services to get people connected to health, mental health, addiction counseling, police services, probation services, the whole gamut of things, social services. And then, you know, once the idea is that people will start to create a plan and work towards a plan, and which in all of our preferred options is that they start to get employment, to reconnect with their families, and to reintegrate into their communities. And then of course, again, there's 24/7 staff. And the next slide, which is just a picture of the inside of Elliott Street. So it gives you a sense of what that community looks like, that it's a professional, clean, welcoming environment for people to live. And the last one for me, second last one maybe. So there's also some payoffs. So, you know, we all know that this is an expensive venture, this kind of programming. But what we also know is that when people are living on the streets, they also have a high cost to social cost. And so there's evidence that there's about approximately a $25,000 per person per year savings by spending the money to put people in this kind of housing. And in the bottom right-hand corner, you'll see, just as an example of how that's realized. So what we're learning is that when people have live in this kind of housing with supports, they're 64% less likely to use an ambulance services. And they're equally about 50% less likely to spend time in hospital. So this kind of investment may feel awkward as the kind of cash outlay, but what we know is that it has a substantial savings for the community, and on top of that, it creates a new environment for a sense of belonging, and it changes the physical look of your streets as well. Thank you.
Okay, we have a short video for everyone to watch.
Living outside, living here, living there. I lived out in Buckridge in the middle of October in a tent, you know, and that's up towards Barkerville. That's a little chilly. Yeah, when you get to that point, it's really hard to keep housing, especially once you're associated with being homeless. What's going on? You wanna come see me? It was wintertime, and he didn't have a home, and they were gonna kill him, the people that I went to visit, because he kept hanging around their place and stealing their cat's food. So I just brought him home. I've had him ever since. He's 17, he's blind. He's a sweetheart, though. He adopted me, I adopted him. He's my snuggle bunny. Well, it's always nice to know you come home to something that loves you, unconditional. This is my cat, TD, stood for touchdown. My dog, Schnauzer. That would be my mommy. Life was actually much better then, when my mom was alive. I still got my mom's candy dish. She liked Scotch mints. Yeah, we still got the same mints in there, too. There was always Sunday dinners. There was, you know, there was a family unit after she passed.
I think we need to really challenge the stigma around homelessness. I can't imagine living outdoors, and I can't imagine, you know, trying to pack all my belongings around with me day in and day out and experiencing some of the challenges that you do when you're homeless.
trying to find somewhere permanent to live, but it's hard to get housing. Housing is really hard to come by. There is no affordable housing.
You know, the people that we work with are very marginalized, they're very vulnerable, and they're often not made to feel welcome in the community because there's a lot of misunderstanding around them. But we get to know people on a very different level, whether it's at the shelter or in housing, and you get to hear their stories and build relationships with them and come to a place of deep caring for people. When you move people from homelessness into supportive housing, we begin to see overall improvements in their health.
Hey, Mark. How are you today?
Here, you feel secure. It's like a burden being let off, you know, like the Hunchback of Notre Dame. I just got rid of my hump.
Chat with you for a little bit, Frank?
Because you have somebody you can go to, and you know that. And here, there's always, somebody on you, somebody giving you, that kick in the ass that you need. Sometimes we need it. Everybody does.
Hey, did you sell your vehicle?
That's what I like. I can go downstairs and I got help.
Anything hopeful? You're trying to sell it, aren't you? Hey, guys. Hello. How's it going?
Staff do a ton of work with our tenants, from providing advocacy and support while they attend appointments.
For an example, we'll be having an activity painting tomorrow with some of the leaves and stuff outside.
Or having a cup of coffee with somebody and having a visit. So staff are doing a lot of that. And so are our tenants. They're doing that with each other as well. The folks that we work with really do need to be close to their health services and other social services, and generally don't have modes of transportation. We have a really good partnership with Northern Health around working with them to get folks on pharmaceutical supply, so moving people off of illicit drugs and poison drugs onto pharmaceutical supply.
Yeah, we have a really good system, really good program here, and I really appreciate Northern Health supporting us.
It's just so convenient in terms of getting them access to healthcare services and minimizing the barriers that they face day to day. And that's where places like Bridges Supportive Housing are amazing, because we're able to get folks housed, which is often the stabilizing factor they need to engage in healthcare services. Without a house, it's pretty difficult to engage in the service.
In here, I just wanted to relax, get my life together, and now I'm loving it. I do the clean team, go out and clean every day, and it's awesome. And you get paid every day to go and help the community. I go out early in the morning to get all the early walkers, and you get through town before the business is all open and the town's clean for them. You pick up the needles, get rid of the paraphernalia off the streets. Just because a person's been down or a drug addict or whatever, or homeless, doesn't mean that they can't contribute.
The Riverview is on the west side of the Fraser River in Quesnel, and we are situated right above the new housing of Bridges Housing. I would say it feels like the grounds in the areas have been safer since the housing complex opened. In fact, this year has probably been the best year for, I think I've had one sharp reported to me so far in the whole school year. It's been a great opportunity for our students to have a slightly better perception of how to be a community that comes together and supports each other.
So supportive housing overall is much more cost-effective to the province and the community than homelessness is, for sure.
Having Bridges in place has been amazing. We've housed 28 individuals that otherwise have been absolutely homeless, which is incredible. We have a need for more.
We are 1 year into being operational here.
We can grab the hairdryer and dry the paint, and then we can start with the leaves.
We get like the edges too and everything?
Yeah, it's up to you, sweetheart.
Yeah, we're just a really special little community in here. We're people who have felt unwelcome in the community quite often, feel really safe and welcome in this space.
You get a brand new home. It's like a brand new start. That's more than a step forward, it's a leap. And hopefully one day I can transition out of here so someone else can have an opportunity. Well, I think other people deserve a chance too. There's lots of them out there that need homes. Too many. Doesn't matter who you are or what you do. We're all human beings. We all matter. It's like I always go, gray matters.
Okay, thanks. And next we're going to hear from Samuel Hogg, Development Manager with BC Housing. Go ahead, Samuel.
Thank you. I can't believe I have to follow that with the dry zoning piece. I just want to talk about the existing, about the site that we're proposing. So it's the address is 530 Carson Avenue. So it's the current site of the Grace Inn. So BC Housing has been leasing units in the building since 2020. So we've been leasing 20 units, and it's a 43 unit building. And the purpose of this presentation, the purpose of this whole situation is that we're requesting to rezone the site to allow BC Housing to purchase it, and we're unable to close the purchase or close the contract of purchase and sale, or remove any subjects from the CPS without a successful rezoning application. So the rezoning application would allow a site-specific use that would allow supportive housing. If you can move on to the next slide, please. So this slide just gives an overview of the site. So you can see there's 5 buildings. It's about 43 units, and it's an old hotel. So you can see it's quite a large site with 5 spread out buildings. If you could move on, thanks. Or next slide. And then just looking at next steps, so we're moving forward through our rezoning process with the City of Quesnel. So we've moved through the first reading and moving on to second reading and then third reading and public hearing. So the third reading and public hearing are scheduled for February 20th. And then if the rezoning was successful, we'd move ahead with a redevelopment plan. So we'd have to go through the development permit process, and we'd work closely with the city and the community, and then work closely with the housing solutions table to develop a redevelopment plan and decide the best mix of affordable housing and supportive housing on that site. And then if the rezoning was successful, and we would be able to close on the purchase and then move forward with procuring an architect and a development team, so including a development consultant and a full design team. With that, I'll move on to Tanya Turner from the City of Quesnel, who has some more information to talk about. Thanks.
Tanya, Director of Development Services for the City of Quesnel. Go ahead, Tanya.
You're muted, Tanya.
Oh, well, unmute you.
Well, double unmute, I think. Thank you. First of all, I'd just like to say thank you to all my BC Housing partners that have presented tonight. There is a strong need for partnerships between different levels of government and government agencies such as BC Housing. And that's reiterated in our official community plan, and is reiterated in a number of initiatives we do. Although BC Housing and the province is primarily responsible for housing, it can't happen without community support and community partnerships. We in Quesnel started doing housing needs assessments in 2010. Realizing that there needs to be more activity to actually get housing going. It was long understood that multifamily housing, particularly apartments, etc., were not being developed in the community and hadn't been for a long time, as was the case in many communities. And a number of communities started going through initiatives such as needs assessments. We did one in 2010. We did an update in 2015. We did a whole revision in 2019. As well as some of our planning documents, our official community plan, zoning, etc. All of our needs assessments have shown a need for affordable housing, and in fact, an increasing need for affordable housing. In 2013, in doing these, we did a affordable housing strategy and identified a number of initiatives to start working on, including a multi-unit incentive bylaw, in 2016. A few of the BC housing projects that you've seen tonight were able to utilize that incentive. The partnering agencies, the local housing providers were able to utilize that incentive to help fund their facilities. We permitted secondary suites and accessory dwelling units, as was guided, as was recommended in the strategy in 2013. We permitted those in the 2019 updates of our zoning bylaw. We also went a little further, and it was quite fun. We developed some pre-reviewed accessory dwelling units so that we could encourage more multi-units, because we knew that there was a need for small scale housing in our community. We haven't had a lot of development in that area due to a number of reasons, including the issues that have happened recently with inflation, etc. We haven't seen the uptake that we wanted with some of those programs. So again, it maintained this strong need for partnerships with partners like BC Housing to help us provide the housing that is needed in our community. The Vulnerable Population Services and Housing Report has just been completed. It's just going to be released. Again, it strongly shows the need for vulnerable population housing, the need for services with that housing, as well as it's showing definitely in the next several years that need is only going to continue to grow, and it's going to continue to grow for very important populations, all populations are important, but the very, some of our most vulnerable populations, like our seniors. The seniors population is exponentially growing in need, is going to be in need of housing supports. There has been provincial legislation that's been going crazy also to try and create more housing in communities. All of these things together, including council holding housing as one of our top strategic initiatives, has led us to the creation of a housing solutions table. That solution table, it will just be being put together here in the next couple of months, and it will be helpful in working with BC Housing through this development project as well. I hope the solutions table will come online right after this is approved and ready to go forward in the community, and help BC Housing with any questions and community consultation they would like. Okay, I'm ready. The process that we need to get through over the next month and a bit, is just completing of the zoning process. Right now, as you can see, we've completed first reading of the zoning bylaw, and this is it. We're in consultation phase. This is what we're doing tonight, part of what we're doing tonight. But it's not only what BC Housing is doing. BC Housing is being proactive, and they're doing a number of outreach initiatives, talking to specific property owners, etc., in and around the area, and being proactive in terms of really trying to make sure they reach out and have conversations with the community, and make sure the community understands that we're looking at a redevelopment here. We're looking at something new, something positive for the community. The next steps following tonight's and following the consultation process, which we're hoping will be completed around the 31st of the end of January. The consultation, all of the notes from the consultation, a summary of the consultation will go to council just for information, and help endorse and provide council with guidance to provide second reading to the bylaw. An open house and the public hearing will be the next public phases of this project. They will happen on February 20th. You will see at 4:30 p.m. at council chamber in City Hall. We will have an open house. What this allows is a question and answer period with members of city staff, as well as with BC Housing representatives who will be on site, or who will be in-house, just to have some personal questions about the development at that time. Then we'll lead into public hearing. Public hearings are about providing comments to council rather than providing questions and getting feedback, having a dialogue. That's why we have the open house in front of the public hearing. It allows you to have the questions and dialogue. The public hearing will allow you to make the comments. That starts at 5:30 on February 20th in council chambers. And then we'll continue on If council likes what they've heard, they will be able to provide third reading, and we're hoping final adoption, early March.
Thank you, Tanya. So that brings us right at the dot of 7 o'clock. Couldn't have timed it better, Tanya. Well done. That brings us to our question section of the session this evening. So to